In the Soviet Union, work was of central importance to the country's implementation of communism. Work would be the force that unified the classes and propelled them all to the next stages of human advancement. Work's importance can be seen in the 1961 program of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union, which describes a society in which labour for the good of society will become the prime, vital requirement of everyone, a necessity recognised by one and all, and the ability of each person will be employed to the greatest benefit of the people. It is impossible for a man in communist society not to work, for neither his social consciousness nor public opinion would permit it. Work, according to one's ability, will become a habit, a prime necessity of life for every member of society. In practice, this meant you were legally obligated to work. If you were of age and able-bodied, you had to have a job up until you retired. It had to be a recognized job too, so even if you made an income selling poetry, if the state did not recognize that poetry as contributing to society, then as far as the state was concerned, you were unemployed. An able-bodied adult that was unemployed was seen as a parasite to society and could be charged with a crime called social parasitism. Many beggars, writers, and poets were convicted of social parasitism and sentenced to hard labour. The Soviet Union heavily promoted work and working. The hammer and sickle of its flag were tools of the workers. Its propaganda depicted strong, square-jawed men pursuing alternative work-based lifestyles, and it frequently recognized citizens as exemplary workers with titles of honor like Hero of Socialist Labor. Now, I respect and admire a strong work ethic, and I've even been known to do a bit of work myself on occasion, but I can't say it's really for me. So I wouldn't have high expectations for my quality of life in a place where there's work on the flag, work on the posters, and work on the medals that are awarded for working. Find me the country with a pint of lager on its flag. See, to me, working is like breathing with a sore throat. It's not particularly pleasant, but you have to do it, and you can kind of tolerate it if you just don't think about how much you want it to be over. You don't want to be reminded you have a sore throat. There are things in life you'd much rather do or think about besides breathing with a sore throat. I mean, working. This was not the case for the Udarniks. The Udarniks were to work what shock troopers are to warfare. In fact, that's actually what Udarnik means, shock worker or strike worker. The term Udarnik dates back to at least the 30s, used to describe an extremely productive worker. One example would be Alexei Stakhanov, a Soviet miner who, in 1935, made headlines around the Soviet Union for reportedly mining a record 102 tons of coal in under 6 hours, 14 times his quota. The Soviet Union promoted Stakhanov's performance as a model Soviet worker, and the 30s saw the rise of the Stakhanovite movement among the workforce. Workers who strived to follow Alexei Stakhanov's example could be known as Stakhanovites. The Soviet Union continued to encourage this culture that promoted work excellence not just as a means of productivity, but as a moral value of the new communist man. By the 60s, the Soviet Union was awarding hard workers the title Shock Worker of Communist Labor, an honor that officially recognized them as Udarnik. The title came with a badge and certificate, as well as a cash prize. Udarniks could be found outside the Soviet Union too. Communist Poland had its own term for an Udarnik, a przewodnik pracy, or model worker. One such przewodnik pracy was Peter Ozanski, a Polish bricklayer celebrated for laying a record 66,000 bricks with a team of 12 men in just 8 hours in 1950. Vincenty Pestrowski, known as the Polish Stakhanov, was a miner recognized in 1947 for achieving a quota efficiency of 270% per month and writing an open letter to fellow workers. "I call for competition from other miners. Who will cut more than me?" He died the following year in 1948, with reports on his death often contradicting each other on the details. One recurring story states Pestrowski returned to work too soon after a medical operation and essentially worked himself to death. The Socialist Federal Republic of Yugoslavia promoted the work of Udarniks too. Alija Sirotanović was a Bosnian man with 6 brothers and 2 sisters. They were all miners. In 1947, Sirotanović set a record in coal extraction. In 1948, he participated in an intermine competition in which he and his 8-man crew mined 128 carloads in a single 8-hour shift. That's 152 tons, even more than Alexei Stakhanov's 102. This was front-page news in Yugoslav newspapers for weeks. Alija Sirotanović even got to meet the Yugoslav Prime Minister, Josip Broz Tito. If there's a term to describe the appearance of someone who just looks like they do bad things with power, this photograph is the most striking example of it. I think if I were a politician, I'd probably try to avoid presenting myself in such a way that it seems like the only 2 words I know in English are oppressive and regime. But I guess that didn't bother his voter base. In a likely apocryphal meeting, Tito supposedly offered Sirotanović to fulfill any wish he had as a reward for his exemplary work. The legend has it that Sirotanović asked for nothing but a bigger shovel. Alija Sirotanović's face can be found on the 20,000 Yugoslav dinar banknote issued in 1987. Yes, they even put work on the money. The promotion of work as a virtue permeated many aspects of life in the Soviet Bloc, but not everyone was on board. Arif Heralic was a metalworker who appeared on the 10 Yugoslav dinar banknote. Photographed in 1955 while he worked on a blast furnace, Heralic was never told the image would be used on the country's currency and accepted just a small payment for the photo. When he saw his face on the banknotes and people started treating him like he had a lot of money, Heralic realized he should have received a much higher compensation and sued the National Bank. He lost and died in poverty in 1971. Many of the work records set by Udarniks were of questionable legitimacy, and it's believed there was often some level of orchestration in having work pre-prepared for an Udarnik to blaze through, or some level of exaggeration where the work of multiple assistants was attributed to one group leader. The records could then be used in propaganda to celebrate workers who had overachieved in their productivity by several 100%, even if the records did not represent realistic working conditions. Some workers took these records at face value and strived to become Udarniks themselves. Others did not, and blamed Udarnik culture for making their lives harder and raising expectations for productivity to unrealistic and unhealthy standards. But in the Soviet Union, it was risky to voice such an opposition for fear of being accused of wrecking. Wrecking was a crime similar to sabotage, and you could be charged with it if you were deemed to be undermining the state. Not only was it a bad idea to openly criticize Udarniks or the culture of work, you could get in trouble just for failing to meet the expectations set by them. In 1937, the Soviet census directly contradicted state propaganda that claimed the country was seeing massive population growth. Even though the census takers had organized and completed the census taking as accurately as they could, their findings showed the population was at least 8 million people short of expectations, and they were accused of deliberately falsifying information to sabotage the census so that it contradicted the state's pronouncements. The census was declared invalid and the organizers arrested and charged with wrecking. The next census in 1939 was conveniently a lot more consistent with state expectations, and it has since become clear this was the result of large-scale manipulation of figures. There was not another census in the Soviet Union for 20 years. In 1991, the Soviet Union turned to its Udarniks and said, "Thanks for breaking your backs in the mines and ironworks for all those decades, but this communism stuff's for Egypts. I'm going back to capitalism." It seems the thanks for dedicating years of your life in service is the same all over the world. So long and good luck. Here's a commemorative tax write-off in honor of you enduring years of misery so I could buy a second boat. Industriousness and assiduity are positive traits for an employee to have. The problem is finding an employer in possession of any positive traits they're not legally bound to. In the transaction of work for money, they will always want more work for less money. Even when the transaction is agreed upon, they will constantly pressure you for more work until eventually you're in a situation where only the money resembles the original arrangement, and you're doing way more work than you ever agreed to. You will not be compensated for going above and beyond, and any rewards you receive will not be proportional to your labor, but to your potential to incentivize other workers in following your example of letting your employers abuse you. Do 100% of the work for 100% of the pay. Don't do 200% of the work for 100% of the pay and a thank you. For more advice, you can watch more of my videos. That is the advice, watch my videos, but they each contain their own nuggets of advice, pearls of wisdom, and whatever else it is that I've been putting in these videos. If you'd like to see more in the future, you can subscribe, and you can join the channel membership to support me monetarily. Unless you're one of those people who always wants more work for less money, in which case, congratulations, you finally have what you want. I do all the work, and you don't give me any money. You've arrived at the ideal business transaction. You have a slave. I hope you're happy. Until next time, stay safe. Photographed in 1955 while he worked on a blast furnace, Heralik. Photographed in 1955 while he worked on a blast furnace. Fucked it up again.